Great. Yeah, thank you, Lena, for having us. Thank you, Condens, too. It's a tool we've been using a lot. Really made our user research process a lot better, as we'll describe in here. But yeah, my name is Nick Alonso-Emanuel. I'm a lead product designer at Syngenta Digital. I'm based out of Chicago, and I work on the product Cropwise Financials.
Hi, thanks for having us, Lena. I'm Nathalia. I'm a UX writer at Syngenta Design Team. I'm in Brazil, and I work mainly on Cropwise Protector. We both work in the Syngenta's global design team, and we work in Cropwise, which is Syngenta's global platform. Syngenta has multiple global solutions to help growers in all stages of agronomic cycle, from seed planning to financial analysis, and all the solutions are all integrated into the Cropwise platform. So in our daily work, we have the challenge of doing design research with our users, who are mainly growers from multiple regions. And today we're going to share some learnings that can be useful if you research in a complex market like agribusiness. So I think the first thing we need to do before planning any research is to kind of get to know the users. And users persona can be a very helpful tool in the first moment, because they can help you understand the multiple structures of farms and the specific characteristics of crops and regions, but they are not enough. Like, users in agribusiness are more complex than user personas can describe, and it's not uncommon to meet a user that is like a fusion of 2 or 3 user personas that we have mapped. So what I mean is that real experience will be the best way to understand the particularities of users. So before starting any research, take any chance you have to get to know your users, like go to fairs, watch your colleagues' interviews, invite yourself for technical visits. Everything can help. When you're working in a product that is a work tool like ours, considering users' workflows is crucial to start planning your researches. And agriculture has very specific workflows. Like, there is the time to plan the season, to select the seeds, to plant, then manage the fields, harvest, evaluate yields. And all of that can happen only once a year or multiple times a year, depending on the region, the crop, and climate conditions. So being aware of all of that is important, because if you are working on a feature that is for planting, you have to consider the amount of time you need to recruit, then interview, then analyze, and iterate, develop, and release this feature before planting season starts. And because if you miss the timing, it will impact on the use of a harvesting feature as well. It will be like a long-term impact. What I mean is, like, releasing your features at certain times can maximize user adoption. And you also have to consider, when you're planning the research, that growers have a very busy schedule. So they usually do not answer the phone during the day because they are in the fields, and it might be even harder to schedule interviews with them during planting or harvesting period, because they are even more overloaded with work. It also means that when we are planning the research, we might consider which methods make more sense, and what makes sense not in the way of what exactly we need to analyze, but also what makes sense according to users' possibilities. Because some techniques can be perfect in theory, but it's hard to put them in practice. Like, as a UX writer, I would love to have like focus groups, but growers, they have a very busy schedule. They are always far from the office, and it would be very complex, time-consuming, and hard to get them all together in the office. So, of course, Syngenta organizes events for customers, and we can use them for some research, but they have their own agendas. So we end up having to stick with the possible research instead of the ideal research sometimes. For usability tests, we also have to consider a few points. Like, it's not uncommon to find users that are they have very deep agronomic knowledge, but they are not so familiar with technology. And sometimes accessing Zoom can be hard for them. And then you share a prototype and you ask them to open and share the screen with you. And this is hard for them. So we have to always consider that we are not seeing the user how they usually navigate in your product. Because the whole situation of having to access Zoom and share the screen, it makes them very uncomfortable. And in this scenario, we imagine that the unmoderated tests can be a better option. And they are good ideas sometimes, but they also can be tricky. Like sometimes we have to discard tests because users open mobile prototypes on web or web prototypes on mobile, or they start the task and leave the prototype, then return 10 minutes later to finish it. And when we are analyzing the amount of time to perform the task, we have to discard the test. I'm not saying for you to give up on research. It's just that we have so many unpredictable events that you need to take into consideration when you are planning your research, because they can sometimes they can delay stages. So after putting together this puzzle of variables and planning the research, we have to prepare for interviews. And this is the perfect moment to ask the experts for help. In our case, we have internal agronomists, and aligning the script with them before starting the interviews is very helpful, because this is the moment when we can ask technical questions to get as much knowledge as possible. So we do not need to take time of our users to ask simple, strictly technical questions like, why is the sugarcane borer a problem for sugarcane growers? Or how to technically manage this pest? This is something that agronomists can tell us beforehand. So when we are talking to the users, we already have this background, and we can focus on understanding how they manage the fields and what pain points they have, so we can have a better design for their needs to solve their problem. Agronomists also can help us finding the right way to approach the topic in a way that sounds more comfortable to users, because they are usually very close to customers, and not all grower is an agronomist, and having this alignment with our internal agronomist helps us to have a better script and to know how to approach the topic in a way that the conversation flows more naturally with the growers. Well, with all this guidance on how to research in a complex market like agribusiness, I guess it's pretty clear that relying on other people outside the research team and design team really helps us building a good research. So aligning with agronomists and the whole product team help us get good ideas and correct the course of the research early if necessary. And also we share our findings with the global design team. And having a tool like Condens help us both aligning with product team and sharing results, because scripts are accessible and product team can add their comments and we can reply there. And so we can have a better planning and a better script. And we can use the global text, not just to share what we got, but also to find valuable information in previous researches, so we do not have to ask the same questions over and over again. So,
all right. Oh.
Go ahead.
We didn't practice the handoff as well, I guess. But no, Natch walked through kind of all of the major things that we think about when we're conducting research in agriculture. And now I'm going to walk through kind of a case study and how we put a lot of those ideas into practice. So this is a case study I performed with my team, 2 other designers who I believe are both on this call now. But this was for a product we work on called CropWise Financials. Going back to that CropWise diagram earlier, CropWise Financials is really meant to allow the grower to understand, their financial inputs and revenue for a season, and be able to both manage their input costs and understand how much they've made. And specifically for the feature we'll be talking about today, we're really digging into that revenue piece and that yield and profitability aspect. So, going back to that growing cycle conversation Natch brought up, this is really a feature that was targeted for the harvest phase and storage and marketing. So the idea here is being if you're not super familiar with agriculture, You grow it on the ground. At some point, you got to harvest it and sell it. This is what we're talking about here. So, the grower has, planted their crops for the season. They are harvesting them, and now they want to sell them. Now they want to understand how much money they made. And to do that, they have to be able to track their yield within CropWise financials. So, you know, um, going into this, we had built a feature called Yield and Revenue, and we had released this in early 2023. This was very much an MVP version. It was really just us something to get out the door to say that we had this feature to start tracking it, but we knew we needed to build and expand on it. So part of our way to understand what we needed to build on was to initiate this user research discovery initiative. Going back again to that timeline, understanding that agriculture works in these rhythms. I'm based in North America. CropWise Financials is primarily released in North America at this point, which means that our harvest season happens in September, October. That's not always true. There are always nuances and edge cases. You have stuff like citrus farms in Florida that can do more year round, but generally we're saying that if we want ideal user adoption for this feature, we want to release it about mid-August to make sure growers have time to learn how to use it and bring it into the workflow for that season. That means we have to start our discovery process early on. We have to kind of have a sense of how long each of the steps will take to make sure we're able to deliver on time. So, once we established a timeline, once we established the research, we started working with participant recruitment. And going back to Natch's point about working with the product team, working with external stakeholders, we worked with our marketing team to reach out to growers, to set up an email sign up, to get some feedback of who would like to participate, learn more research. We got some sign up. We were able to create the participants within Condens. That's another feature we use to also make sure that we're not reaching out to the same participants over and over again, and that different teams can understand who we've talked to last. Now we have our recruitment, now we have our timeline, we start to work towards our test plan. And we centered this around three main goals. The first was to understand users' expectation around viewing revenue. Like, even before they've used our software, users have tracked their revenue, users have tracked their yield. We need to understand what they expect to have in any feature that we bring that also adds value to what they need. Second point, we also need to understand how they're doing it. What parts go into harvesting a field of corn and turning it into a load ticket that gets sent to a grain silo or gets sent to be sold. And finally, we need to understand both those pieces to initially improve on our MVP version of yield. So as we approach this and we approach these three main goals, we built around two main methods for our testing, which we both condensed into an hour-long interview with our participants. So the first was user testing. Now, initially we approached this as a usability test, but what we quickly realized is there was enough gaps in our knowledge of user expectation and knowledge that it wouldn't be enough to just validate if users could work through the interface. We had to validate that the interface made sense to them, that lined up with what they needed to have happen in the tool. So rather than focus on doing necessarily a click-through test and validating it in a quantitative way, we really focused on the qualitative aspect of it. We also paired that with a contextual inquiries, asking questions, understanding what the journey is from the crop being harvested off the field and being sold or being put into storage, and what's that like, what kind of information the grower is receiving and how they track that. So we conducted our sessions, our tests. We did them over Zoom, again, to Natcha's point, we had growers all across the United States. So I think we had one in Idaho, we had one in, I want to say North Carolina, and I think we had one in Iowa, I want to say. I'm not 100% sure on that, but they were all spread out throughout the state. So, it wouldn't be feasible to get into a room and talk with them. Zoom tests and these kinds of things have been really advantageous for us to be able to conduct this type of varied research. After we conducted those sessions, we uploaded them to Condens. We used the transcription feature. And then me and my team of designers, we worked through tagging. We also collaborated with a product team to really come forward with our analysis. And we put all of that together. Also, forgot to mention global tags, big thing we used again, so this research can be cross-referenced with other teams. So other teams don't have to start at the point of understanding financial information for growers in North America. But finally, we landed on three main key findings that would drive the design and development of this feature. So first, growers track yield differently based on what crops they're harvesting. This sounds pretty self-explanatory, but it actually is very nuanced. So, for example, corn, a lot of times growers don't really care what field it came off of, or the processors or the people they sell it to. It just kind of has to go. They have to know how much it weighed and then be able to sell it based off of that. There are other crops, such as potatoes, where those quality metrics matter a ton. The people that they're selling those potatoes to need to know exactly what field it came off of, details like soil type, quality, grade. So, there's no one size fits all when it comes to this type of yield load entry. That's something that the research really revealed to us. Second, almost all growers are growing multiple types. It could be as simple as a row crop grower growing both corn and soybean. It could be, we talked to one grower who was growing something like corn, soybean, fava beans, like tons of different crops. Seems crazy to manage. Each one of them gets sent to a different type of processor. Each one is marketed in a different way. Again, there's no one size fits all, even within a single grower. How the grower handles all of those different types of loads are wildly different. Some get a massive Excel file with 300 different entries. Others just get it all in one load. And so thinking all of those pieces together, our conclusion we really ran to is that growers need a customizable, reusable solution for tracking these yield load tickets, tracking, understanding how much they made off of the field and where it went. So we went back to the design team. We collaborated with our product managers a little bit more, and then we approached this idea of a reusable template output. Basically, the idea being that growers don't want to have to select every single field that they're going to need for each specific crop, but we know it's going to be different. So we landed on this idea of being able to create a template for each crop type, and then going from there and being able to reuse it going forward. So, the research techniques really drove this. And if we hadn't been able to do this discovery research, then we really would not have landed on a solution that we found is much more amenable to what our user needs are. So, in conclusion, agriculture user research isn't wildly different than other types of user research. You're still talking to users, you're still understanding needs, you're still understanding pain points, but it really comes down to understanding the rhythms of agriculture and how our growers treat technology. These are the most important pieces alongside, the domain specific knowledge. We don't want to have to sit in an interview and ask a grower the specifics about harvest moisture when we can just talk to somebody within our own company and understand that. We want to be spending the time talking to our users and understanding what their needs are. What are their pain points? What are the things that they're lacking that we can provide value with for them? Working on a global team means we need a tool to be able to centralize our research. Before we had adopted Condens, we frequently ran into the issue of finding other teams across the globe that had conducted similar research that if we had known ahead of time, we could have more optimized and used. Now that we have Condens, we have a system to be able to track that across all of our teams. But yeah, that basically covers it. Thank you all for listening, and I believe we're going to open things up for some questions now.